Millionaire betrays his loyal wife for being infertile, only to return years later and find her raising twins without him. Welcome to beautiful Mr. Peter stories, where every tale sparks your imagination. Today, we're diving into another heartwarming adventure you won't want to miss. If you love captivating stories, make sure to subscribe and join our growing family. The crystal chandeliers of Le Chéri cast dancing shadows across the white tablecloths as Augustus Everett orchestrated his wife's humiliation with the precision of a symphony conductor. 7 years of marriage would end tonight in the same 5-star restaurant where their love story had begun. Anastasia Thaddeus sat perfectly still, her dark fingers wrapped around the stem of her untouched wine glass, as her husband's words cut through the refined atmosphere. She had known something was wrong the moment Augustus insisted on this dinner, had sensed it in the way he'd been checking his phone all evening, in the slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I want a divorce," Augustus announced, his voice carrying just loud enough to reach the neighboring tables. He didn't bother to lower his tone. This was a performance after all, and he'd chosen his audience carefully. Around them, Seattle's elite paused mid-bite, their forks hovering between plate and mouth. 7 years I've waited for an heir, 7 years wasted on a barren woman." The words hung in the air like poison. Anastasia's grip tightened on her glass, but her face remained composed, a mask of dignity she'd perfected through years of society events. She watched as a young woman approached their table, her red dress a slash of color against the restaurant's muted tones. Vivian Chen, Augustus's secretary of 2 years, slid into the seat beside him with practiced grace. "Hello, Anastasia," Vivian purred, her fingers intertwining with Augustus's on the white tablecloth. The massive diamond on her right hand caught the light. Anastasia recognized it as the one she'd found in Augustus's study last month, when he'd claimed to be working late. The other diners were openly staring now. This was better than any reality show, better than the society gossip they usually had to sustain themselves on. The perfect power couple of Seattle's business world, imploding in real time. Phones were discreetly raised, recording every moment of Anastasia's humiliation. Augustus leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment like a fine wine. "Vivian and I are getting married as soon as the divorce is final. She understands the importance of family, of legacy." His eyes raked over Anastasia with calculated cruelty. "Unlike some people." Anastasia's mind flashed to the fertility clinic visits, the endless treatments, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep while Augustus worked late at the office. All those times he'd blamed her, made her feel less than worthy, when he'd never once agreed to get tested himself. The irony of it all threatened to bubble up in hysterical laughter. Her research team had made the breakthrough just last week, a revolutionary fertility treatment that would change thousands of lives. But Augustus didn't know that. He didn't know about the late nights at the lab, the successful trials, or the test she'd taken that morning that would change everything. With deliberate slowness, Anastasia placed her napkin on the table and stood. Her silk dress, the same shade of midnight blue as the night sky, rustled softly. 7 years of marriage had taught her many things, but most importantly, it had taught her the power of dignity in the face of betrayal. "The divorce papers will be on your desk tomorrow morning," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I suggest you get tested yourself before making promises about children to your new fiancé." She let the word hang in the air, watching as a flicker of uncertainty crossed Augustus's face. Vivian's smirk faltered slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" But Anastasia was already walking away, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a steady rhythm. She felt Augustus's eyes boring into her back, saw the reflection of raised phones in the restaurant's windows, heard the murmurs of the watching crowd. Let them talk. Let them gossip. In a few months, they'd have something entirely different to whisper about. As the valet brought her car around, Anastasia placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. The first signs of morning sickness had started yesterday, but she'd attributed it to stress. Now, with 2 positive pregnancy tests hidden in her bathroom drawer and groundbreaking research data on her laptop, she knew better. The twins growing inside her would be her secret for now, her own private victory against the man who had just tried to destroy her publicly. The city lights blurred as she drove home, but her eyes remained dry. She had earned every moment of the revenge that was to come. But unlike Augustus, she would serve it cold. Time would reveal all, her success, her children, and most deliciously of all, the truth about who had been infertile all along. Behind her, Le Chéri buzzed with the scandal of the century, phones lighting up across Seattle as the news spread. But Anastasia smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. Augustus Everett had written the first chapter of their story with betrayal, but she would write the ending, and it would be spectacular. Sweet memories and silent lies. 7 years earlier, Anastasia Thaddeus first caught Augustus Everett's eye at a charity gala for Seattle Children's Hospital. She wasn't supposed to be there. A last-minute invitation from a colleague had put her in that glittering ballroom, wearing a borrowed dress and feeling distinctly out of place among the city's elite. Her research on fertility treatments had attracted some attention, but she was still just a dedicated scientist, far removed from the world of million-dollar donations and champagne fountains. Augustus, however, had been the king of that world. That night he'd been surrounded by Seattle's most eligible women, all vying for the attention of the city's most coveted bachelor. Yet his eyes had found her across the crowded room, drawn to the way she stood slightly apart from the crowd, more interested in studying the cellular structure diagram on her phone than the social dynamics around her. Their first conversation had been about science, not small talk. He'd approached with 2 glasses of champagne, but instead of offering the usual platitudes, he'd asked about her research. For 3 hours, they'd stood in their own bubble, discussing the potential impact of her work while the party swirled around them. She'd been impressed by his genuine interest, his quick understanding of complex concepts. He'd been captivated by her passion, her brilliance, and the way she seemed completely unimpressed by his wealth. The courtship that followed was like something out of a fairy tale. Augustus pursued her with the same intensity he brought to his business deals. Every morning, her lab would receive a fresh delivery of roses, red for passion, pink for admiration, white for new beginnings. He sent coffee to her entire research team during late-night experiments, ordered midnight dinners when she forgot to eat, and seemed to understand the importance of her work. Their first real date had been at Le Chéri. Augustus had rented out the entire restaurant, but instead of finding it ostentatious, Anastasia had been touched by his consideration. "You're not comfortable with crowds," he'd said simply. "This way you can relax." They'd talked until dawn, about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. He'd confessed his pressure to create a legacy, not just in business but through family. She'd shared her own desires for children once her research was established. Their wedding, 6 months later, had been a compromise between his world and hers. The ceremony was grand enough to satisfy his social obligations, but the vows were deeply personal, written together during quiet evenings at her apartment. They'd promised to support each other's dreams, to be partners in all things, to face life's challenges together. The first 2 years had been blissful. Augustus championed her research, using his connections to secure funding and partnerships. He attended every presentation, beaming with pride from the front row. At home they created their own perfect world. Breakfast in bed on Sundays, spontaneous dance parties in their kitchen, long walks discussing everything from quantum physics to ancient philosophy. The trouble began subtly, so subtly that Anastasia would later struggle to pinpoint exactly when things changed. Perhaps it was the first time Augustus missed one of her presentations, sending Vivian with an elaborate bouquet instead. Or maybe it was the way his eyes began to drift around the room during their conversations, as if searching for something or someone more interesting. Their first attempt at starting a family had been filled with optimism. Augustus had bought a gorgeous brownstone with rooms already painted in neutral colors, waiting to be filled with the sound of children's laughter. Each month brought new hope, and each disappointment was weathered together, or so she thought. Looking back, Anastasia could now see the warning signs she'd ignored. The late-night calls he stepped away to take, the business trips that grew more frequent, the way Vivian seemed to know his schedule better than Anastasia did, the subtle changes in his wardrobe, new cologne, designer suits she hadn't helped choose, the growing distance in their bed, his touches becoming perfunctory, mechanical. She'd thrown herself into her research, telling herself it was for them, for their future family. The breakthrough she'd been pursuing would help countless couples struggling with infertility, including, she'd hoped, them. Augustus had stopped attending her presentations entirely by then, always having some urgent business meeting that coincidentally involved his young, attractive secretary. The society papers had started whispering first. Blind items about a prominent businessman seen dining intimately with his assistant. Photos of Augustus and Vivian at charity events, standing closer than professional boundaries would dictate. Anastasia had ignored them all, focusing instead on her work, on their dream of a family. The final year of their marriage had been a slow-motion car crash. Augustus grew distant, irritable, quick to blame her for their inability to conceive. He refused to consider that he might be the one with fertility issues, dismissing the suggestion of getting tested himself. Instead, he'd pushed her into more and more aggressive treatments, watching with growing resentment as each one failed. What Augustus never knew, what he couldn't have known as he planned his cruel public dismissal of their marriage, was that Anastasia had already begun suspecting the truth. Her research had revealed patterns, indicators that pointed to male infertility in cases like theirs. She'd kept this knowledge to herself, watching and waiting, gathering data while her husband fell deeper into his affair with Vivian. The night before their final dinner at Le Chéri, Anastasia had found the diamond ring receipt in Augustus's study. She'd known then what was coming, had prepared herself for the public humiliation he would orchestrate. What she hadn't prepared for was the fierce joy of knowing that her latest fertility treatment, tested in secret on herself, had worked. The ultimate victory was already growing inside her, unknown to the man who would soon throw away everything they had built together. Behind closed doors. After Augustus's public betrayal, Anastasia's life became a carefully choreographed dance of appearances. By day, Seattle's elite watched her with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity, whispering behind designer handbags about how the brilliant researcher had lost her millionaire husband to a younger woman. By night, she poured herself into her work at the lab, her hand occasionally drifting to her still flat stomach, harboring a secret that would change everything. The first trimester was brutal. Morning sickness struck during important presentations, forcing her to maintain composure while her body waged war against itself. Her team attributed her pale complexion to the stress of the divorce, offering quiet support in the form of ginger tea and subtle schedule adjustments. Only Dr. Sarah Chen, her closest colleague and the only person who knew about the pregnancy, understood the true magnitude of what was happening. Twins, Sarah had whispered during the first ultrasound, performed after hours in their research facility. And look at these markers. The treatment worked perfectly. The sound of 2 strong heartbeats had filled the small room, bringing tears to Anastasia's eyes. These weren't just her children, They were living proof of her research's success. The divorce proceedings dragged on, with Augustus's lawyers fighting for every penny. He seemed determined to leave her with nothing, perhaps punishment for her dignified exit from that restaurant. What he didn't know was that Anastasia had been preparing for this possibility for months. Her research patents were ironclad, protected under her name alone. The breakthrough fertility treatment, now proven successful by her own pregnancy, would revolutionize the medical field and her bank account. Vivian moved into the mansion before the divorce was even final, parading around Seattle society in Anastasia's former role. Society columns gushed about the whirlwind romance, carefully avoiding mentions of infidelity or the awkward timing. Augustus threw lavish parties, showing off his young fiancée, while simultaneously trying to crush his soon-to-be ex-wife in court. At 4 months, Anastasia's pregnancy became harder to hide. She took a sabbatical from public appearances, citing the need to focus on her research. The scientific community rallied around her, impressed by her dedication in the face of personal turmoil. Grant money poured in as preliminary results from her treatment trials showed unprecedented success rates. The irony of her situation wasn't lost on her. Every time Augustus's lawyers demanded another meeting, she sat across from them, knowing she carried the very children he'd divorced her for being unable to provide. Her body, which he deemed defective, was nurturing not one, but 2 perfect lives. Lives that, according to her research, would have been impossible if he had been capable of fathering children. At 6 months, she received an unexpected visitor. Vivian's mother, Dr. Margaret Chen, a respected fertility specialist, requested a private meeting. In her office, the older doctor laid out a troubling pattern. Augustus had been married briefly before Anastasia to a woman who had also supposedly been infertile. That marriage, too, had ended in a cruel public spectacle. "He's showing the same signs with Vivian," Margaret revealed, her hands twisting in her lap. "The blame, the public humiliation, the refusal to get tested himself. I won't let my daughter suffer the same fate you did." She paused, studying Anastasia's carefully arranged blazer. "Unless something has already proven he's the problem." Anastasia simply smiled, letting her hand rest briefly on her growing belly. Margaret's eyes widened in understanding, and a plan began to form between the 2 women. They would need patience, documentation, and perfect timing. The pregnancy continued to progress beautifully. Anastasia's treatment protocol was proving to be a miracle for other women as well. By her 7th month, hiding in oversized lab coats was no longer feasible, but it didn't matter. She worked from home, coordinating with her team remotely, preparing for both the baby's arrival and the public revelation that would shake Seattle society to its core. She hired a private investigator to document Augustus's pattern of behavior. The evidence was damning, a history of blaming women for his own infertility, using his wealth and influence to silence questions about his virility, destroying the reputations of those who dared suggest he might be the problem. 3 marriages, 3 infertile wives, and a trail of hidden medical records that told the true story. The babies kicked strongly now, especially during her late-night research sessions. Sometimes, alone in her new penthouse apartment, Anastasia would talk to them about their father. Not about his cruelty or betrayal, but about the good man she'd once loved, the man who'd spent hours discussing scientific theories and dreaming of a family. Those dreams would still come true, just not in the way anyone had expected. As her due date approached, Anastasia prepared her final move. Her research paper was ready for publication, documenting the successful treatment of male infertility, including a carefully anonymized case study that matched Augustus's specific condition. Vivian had begun to show the same signs of strain that Anastasia remembered from her own marriage. the weight of constant blame and failure crushing her once confident demeanor. The twins grew stronger each day, their kicks a reminder of the perfect justice that was about to unfold. Anastasia didn't want revenge. Not really. What she wanted was truth, and soon the whole world would know it. Augustus had orchestrated a public disgrace for each of his wives, but he never imagined that his greatest humiliation would come from the very thing he'd tried to hide, wrapped in the perfect package of two beautiful babies who proved beyond any doubt that he had been wrong all along. A secret blessing. The day Anastasia's twins were born, Seattle was blanketed in a rare spring snow. She had just finished reviewing the final proofs of her groundbreaking research paper when the first contraction hit. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had kept her secret for 9 months, drove her to the private wing of Swedish Medical Center, where a carefully selected medical team awaited. The delivery suite overlooked the city skyline, now softened by swirling white flakes. Between contractions, Anastasia could see Le Chéris's distinctive red awning in the distance, a reminder of how far she'd come since that fateful night. The society pages that morning had featured yet another article about Augustus and Vivian's struggling marriage, their public appearances growing tenser with each passing month. 23 hours of labor brought her greatest triumph. A boy and a girl, born 3 minutes apart. They were perfect, their tiny faces bearing an unmistakable resemblance to both her and Augustus. The girl had her father's distinctive green eyes and Anastasia's delicate nose, while the boy was blessed with her warm brown eyes and Augustus's strong jawline. There would be no questioning their parentage when the time came. "Theodora and Theodore," she whispered, cradling them both. The names held special meaning, gifts from God, which they truly were. Her miracle babies, conceived through her own revolutionary treatment, would change not only her life, but the lives of countless other families struggling with male infertility. The first few weeks passed in a blur of midnight feedings and gentle lullabies. Anastasia had prepared meticulously for single motherhood, converting her home office into a state-of-the-art nursery decorated in soothing shades of sage and lavender. Her team kept the research center running smoothly, understanding that their director needed this time with her children. The twins thrived under her care. Theo was the serious one, watching the world with intense concentration, while Thea was all smiles and curious, hands reaching for everything in sight. They had their father's determination, something that brought both amusement and a twinge of sadness to Anastasia's heart. Despite everything, she couldn't hate Augustus. These children were living proof that their love, however brief, had created something extraordinary. At 3 months, while the twins napped peacefully in their matching bassinets, Anastasia received the news she'd been waiting for. Her research paper had been accepted by the world's leading fertility journal. The publication would coincide with a major medical conference in Seattle, where she was scheduled to be the keynote speaker. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The media buzz around her breakthrough treatment built steadily. Medical journals praised her innovative approach to male infertility, particularly in cases where the man had refused testing or treatment. The specific hormonal markers she'd identified matched Augustus's condition exactly, something only a handful of people knew. As the twins grew, so did their father's troubles. Augustus's marriage to Vivian was crumbling under the same pressures that had destroyed his previous relationships. The whispers at charity events had turned from admiration to speculation. Why hadn't the young, healthy couple produced an heir? The society columns that had once celebrated their romance now hinted at deeper problems. At 6 months, the twins began showing more of their father's features. Theo had Augustus's characteristic frown when concentrating, while Thea shared his infectious laugh. Anastasia documented everything meticulously, photos, videos, and detailed medical records that proved beyond doubt that these children were Everett's. Dr. Margaret Chen, Vivian's mother, became a frequent visitor, bringing both grandmotherly affection and valuable intelligence about Augustus's deteriorating marriage. Vivian had started fertility treatments, enduring the same painful procedures and blame that Anastasia had faced. But this time, armed with the truth about Augustus's condition, they could prevent another woman from being publicly humiliated. The twins celebrated their first Christmas in a penthouse filled with love and laughter. Anastasia hosted a small gathering of trusted friends. Her research team, Sarah, Margaret, and a few loyal colleagues who had stood by her through everything. As Theo and Thea charmed the guests with their matching holiday outfits, she shared her plans for the upcoming medical conference. January brought news that Vivian had finally left Augustus, citing his cruelty and refusal to acknowledge potential fertility issues on his side. The divorce proceedings promised to be as ugly as Anastasia's had been. But this time, Augustus faced a formidable opponent in Dr. Margaret Chen, who had gathered extensive documentation of his pattern of emotional abuse. The twins took their first steps within days of each other, toddling across the penthouse's plush carpets with determination. Anastasia captured every moment, knowing that soon these precious private memories would become part of a very public story. Her children were living proof of both her scientific breakthrough and Augustus's lies, but more importantly, they were her greatest joy. As spring approached again, bringing with it the twins' first birthday, Anastasia prepared for the medical conference that would change everything. Her presentation would reveal not only the groundbreaking treatment, but also its first successful case, her own. The twins would make their public debut in a way that would leave no doubt about their parentage or the truth behind Augustus's pattern of blamed infertility. The night before the conference, as she watched her children sleep peacefully in their cribs, Anastasia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. These babies, conceived in love and born into secrecy, would soon help expose a truth that would reshape not only their family's story, but also the lives of countless others struggling with infertility. They were her miracle, her revenge, and her greatest achievement, all wrapped into two perfect packages. The perfect storm. The Seattle Medical Conference Center buzzed with anticipation on the morning of Dr. Anastasia Thaddeus's keynote address. The grand ballroom was packed with fertility specialists, researchers, and pharmaceutical representatives from around the world, all eager to hear about the breakthrough treatment that had shown unprecedented success rates in clinical trials. Augustus Everett sat in the front row, his presence no coincidence. His pharmaceutical company had been desperately trying to acquire rights to similar fertility treatments, seeking to save face after Vivian's very public departure and accusations about his own fertility issues. He hadn't seen Anastasia since their divorce was finalized 18 months ago, and his eyes narrowed as she stepped onto the stage. She was different, radiant, confident, carrying herself with an assurance that made him shift uncomfortably in his seat. Her presentation began with hard data, success rates, clinical trials, hormone markers. The medical community leaned forward collectively as she described the specific genetic markers that could identify previously undiagnosed male infertility. "The breakthrough came," Anastasia said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room, "when we identified a particular genetic sequence that appears in approximately 2% of male infertility cases. Men with this marker often show no other symptoms and frequently refuse testing, leading to years of their partners enduring unnecessary treatments." In the third row, Dr. Margaret Chen watched Augustus's face carefully. His hand had tightened on his armrest, a slight sheen of sweat visible on his forehead. He knew, as only a handful of people in the room did, that she was describing his exact condition. The traditional approach, Anastasia continued, has been to focus treatment on the female partner, subjecting women to invasive procedures and hormonal treatments that have no chance of success without addressing the underlying male fertility issue. Her eyes met Augustus's briefly. This approach has led to countless failed marriages, psychological trauma, and public humiliation for women who were never the source of the fertility problems. The atmosphere in the room shifted as medical professionals recognized the implications. Years of misdiagnosed cases, of women blamed and treated for problems that originated with their male partners, of families destroyed by medical ignorance and male pride. Today, Anastasia said, standing taller, I'm proud to present not just the research data, but living proof of our treatment's success. She gestured to the side of the stage, where Sarah appeared pushing a double stroller. Augustus's face went ashen as Sarah lifted two beautiful toddlers from the stroller. They were dressed in matching outfits that highlighted their parentage. Theo in a miniature version of the distinctive blue suit Augustus wore in his company photos, Thea in a dress that matched Anastasia's professional attire. My own twins, Anastasia announced to the gasping crowd, conceived through this treatment protocol, are our first success story. Their genetic matching results are included in your conference materials, along with comprehensive DNA testing confirming their parentage. The room erupted in murmurs as the twins smiled at the crowd, their features a perfect blend of Anastasia and Augustus. Medical professionals flipped frantically through their documents, finding the detailed genetic analysis that proved beyond any doubt that Augustus Everett was the father. These children represent hope, Anastasia continued, her voice steady as Augustus stumbled to his feet. Hope for couples struggling with undiagnosed male infertility. Hope for women who have been wrongly blamed and shamed. Hope for families who thought they had no options. Augustus tried to leave, but Margaret Chen blocked his path. Around him, doctors were already discussing the implications, connecting dots between his public accusations of infertility against multiple wives and the genetic condition Anastasia had just exposed. The treatment protocol, Anastasia said over the growing buzz, will be made available worldwide through our research foundation. We've partnered with leading fertility clinics to ensure accessibility and comprehensive testing for both partners. She paused, letting her next words land carefully. No woman should ever again be publicly humiliated for a condition that isn't hers. The twins, seemingly understanding their role in this moment, waved at the crowd. Theo's serious expression, so like his father's, and Thea's confident smile, mirrors of their parents, left no doubt about their heritage. Photos were already circulating on social media, side-by-side comparisons of the children with Augustus's own baby pictures that had once graced Seattle's society pages. Augustus finally pushed past Margaret, nearly running for the exit, but it was too late. Reporter Maria Santos, who had covered all three of his marriages and subsequent divorces, stepped into his path with a microphone. Mr. Everett, would you care to comment on Dr. Thaddeus's presentation, or perhaps explain why you publicly blamed 3 wives for infertility issues that genetic testing now proves were yours? The conference had become a perfect storm of scientific vindication and personal justice. Medical professionals crowded around Anastasia, eager to learn more about the treatment that could help their own patients. The twins, now back in their stroller, became the center of attention as doctors marveled at the living proof of the treatment's success. Sarah handed Anastasia a stack of business cards from pharmaceutical companies interested in distributing the treatment globally. Among them was a note from Vivian. Thank you for saving me from the same fate. I'm sorry I didn't know sooner. As the day wound down, Anastasia sat in her office overlooking the Seattle skyline, her twins playing contentedly at her feet. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing, calls from medical journals, research facilities and women's advocacy groups, but the call she was waiting for came just before sunset. "We need to talk," Augustus said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "About the children, about everything." Anastasia watched Theo stack blocks, while Thea attempted to climb her desk. "Yes," she agreed, "we do. But this time, we'll talk on my terms." She paused, letting him feel the weight of the moment. "And Augustus, bring your medical records, all of them." The sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of victory. In her office, surrounded by the proof of both her professional triumph and personal vindication, Anastasia finally allowed herself to feel the full magnitude of the day. Her research would help countless families. Her children would know their father, and most importantly, the truth had finally set everyone free. The price of pride. The private dining room at Le Chéri felt smaller than Augustus remembered. He sat rigid in his chair, facing the woman he had once cast aside so cruelly in this very restaurant. But tonight, Anastasia commanded the space, her quiet confidence more powerful than his wealth had ever been. The twins were with Sarah for the evening, though their presence lingered in the photos spread across the table between their parents. School pictures, birthday celebrations, first steps, a chronicle of 18 months of moments Augustus had missed through his own arrogance. "They're beautiful," he whispered, touching the edge of a photo showing Theo and Thea on their first birthday. His son had his serious expression, his daughter his mother's smile. The resemblance was undeniable, crushing him with the weight of what he'd thrown away. "They are," Anastasia agreed, her voice neutral. "Theo's already showing an interest in science. He loves watching experiments in the lab, from a safe distance, of course. And Thea, she's a natural leader. The daycare staff say she organizes the other children for games." Augustus swallowed hard, recognizing his own childhood traits in their descriptions. The stack of medical records he'd brought lay untouched beside him, though they both knew what they contained. 3 marriages, 3 infertile wives, and 1 genetic condition he'd refused to acknowledge. "I've spoken to my lawyers," he said finally. "I want to make this right. Whatever you want. Money, shares in the company, a trust fund for the children." Anastasia held up her hand, stopping him. "This isn't about money, Augustus. It never was. Do you know what Theo asked me last week? He wanted to know why all his friends at daycare have daddies who pick them up sometimes, but he doesn't." The words hit him like physical blows. He thought of his own father, distant and demanding, and how he'd sworn to be different if he ever had children. Instead, he'd managed to be worse. He'd denied their very existence through his pride. "My research foundation is launching nationwide next month," Anastasia continued. "We'll be offering free fertility testing for couples, with a focus on comprehensive male testing. The genetic marker you carry. It's more common than we initially thought. Hundreds of marriages have probably ended because men like you refuse to consider they might be the source of the problem." Augustus flinched at the accuracy of her words. "Vivian's mother. She told me about the support group. Women I'd blamed, humiliated. They're helping others now, aren't they?" "They're saving lives," Anastasia corrected. "Do you know how many women contemplate suicide after being publicly shamed for infertility? How many marriages end in bitter accusations when a simple test could have identified the real issue? Your ex-wives have turned their pain into purpose. Even Vivian's joined the Foundation's board." The waiter appeared with their meals, but Augustus couldn't eat. The magnitude of his actions over the years pressed down on him. Not just the wives he'd blamed and discarded, but the children he'd nearly missed knowing. "The twins have a checkup next week," Anastasia said, cutting her salmon with precise movements. "Their pediatrician has all the records documenting their genetic connection to you, their conception through my treatment protocol, and their developmental progress. If you're serious about being in their lives, that's where we'll start." A medical appointment? Augustus frowned, old habits of control rising. Yes. Anastasia's voice was firm. You need to understand them medically before you can be part of their lives emotionally. They're not accessories, Augustus. They're not proof of virility or public relations opportunities. They're children who need a father who sees them for who they are. She pulled out a thick folder. Medical records, developmental assessments, psychological evaluations. This is what responsible parenting looks like. Every decision documented, every milestone recorded, every potential health concern tracked. Being their father means understanding all of it. The weight of what he'd missed crashed over him. While he'd been protecting his pride, Anastasia had been building a foundation of love and science around their children. She'd given them not just life, but a legacy of truth and strength. There will be conditions, she continued. Therapy. Both individual and co-parenting, full disclosure of your medical history to help other families, public acknowledgement of the truth about our divorce and your pattern with Vivian and your first wife. The twins deserve honesty, not convenient stories. Augustus nodded slowly, understanding that this was his last chance at redemption. And the foundation, my company's resources, will be welcomed but not controlled, Anastasia finished. Your money can help families, Augustus, but only if you've learned the right lessons from all this. She pulled out her phone, showing him a video of the twins in her lab, wearing tiny safety goggles as they watched a harmless chemical reaction create colorful foam. Their delighted laughter pierced his heart. They're curious, brilliant, and completely unaware of the storm that surrounded their birth, Anastasia said softly. I'd like to keep it that way. They should know you as the father you can become, not the man you were. The enormity of the task ahead humbled him. Years of pride and prejudice had cost him precious time with his children. Now, under the watchful eyes of their mother, he would have to prove himself worthy of their love. When can I meet them? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. After the medical appointment, Anastasia said. If you show up, pay attention, and demonstrate that you understand this isn't about you, it's about them. Then we'll arrange a supervised visit. As if on cue, her phone lit up with a photo from Sarah. The twins had fallen asleep during their bedtime story, clutching their favorite stuffed animals. Augustus stared at their peaceful faces, seeing his own features softened by innocence. They're early risers, Anastasia mentioned, gathering her things. Theo likes his oatmeal with blueberries, and Thea won't eat eggs unless they're scrambled with cheese. They both love reading time, but get cranky if they miss their afternoon nap. These are the details that matter now, Augustus. Not your pride, not your public image, just two small people who deserve the best of both their parents. She stood, ready to leave him, with the weight of his choices and the hope of redemption. The appointment is Tuesday at 10. Dr. Chen's office. Yes, Vivian's mother. She's their pediatrician, and she'll be brutally honest about whether you're ready to be in their lives. Augustus watched her walk away, just as she had 18 months ago. But this time, instead of spite and victory, he felt the crushing weight of accountability and the faint stirring of hope. On the table, the twins smiled up at him from their photos, offering a second chance he wasn't sure he deserved, but desperately wanted to earn. A father's journey. The pediatrician's waiting room felt like a courtroom to Augustus Everett. Children's drawings decorated the walls, and the sound of young laughter filtered through from the play area. He arrived 20 minutes early, dressed not in his usual power suit, but in casual clothes that Anastasia had suggested would be less intimidating for the twins. Dr. Margaret Chen's face remained professionally neutral as she led him and Anastasia into her office. The twins were scheduled to arrive with Sarah later, giving the adults time to establish ground rules. On the doctor's desk sat thick files, medical histories that told the story of his children's first 18 months of life. Before we begin, Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of both professional and personal investment. "I need you to understand something, Mr. Everett. In this office, you are not a CEO. You are not a millionaire. You are simply the father of two toddlers who need stability, honesty, and unconditional love." The next hour was a crash course in his children's lives. Theo's mild allergies to strawberries, Thea's tendency to develop high fevers when teething, their vaccination schedules, sleep patterns, dietary preferences. Augustus took notes with the same intensity he usually reserved for business deals. "They're advanced for their age," Dr. Chen noted, showing him development charts, "particularly in verbal skills and problem-solving, but they're also highly sensitive to emotional atmospheres. Any tension between their parents will affect them deeply." Anastasia sat quietly, watching her ex-husband absorb the magnitude of parental responsibility. She'd been living these details for 18 months while he'd been running from the truth. Now, faced with the comprehensive documentation of his children's lives, his famous control seemed to crumble. A gentle knock interrupted them. Sarah entered with the twins, who immediately ran to their mother. Theo clutched his favorite book about space, while Thea carried the stuffed elephant she never went anywhere without. Augustus's breath caught. In person, their resemblance to him was even more striking. Theo's serious concentration as he studied the new adult in the room. Thea's confident curiosity as she peeked around her mother's legs. "Children," Anastasia said softly, "remember how we talked about meeting someone special today?" She beckoned Augustus closer, but not too close. "This is your father." The word hung in the air like a prayer. Theo gripped his book tighter, analytical even at 2 years old. Thea, ever the brave one, took a small step forward. "You look like my picture," she declared, referring to the family photos Anastasia had carefully shared with them over the past weeks, preparing them for this moment. Augustus knelt down, making himself smaller, less intimidating. "I do?" he asked, his voice gentler than anyone in the room had ever heard it. Theo, not to be outdone by his sister, held up his book. "Do you like space?" he asked solemnly, offering the ultimate toddler test of character. "I love space," Augustus replied honestly. "When I was your age, I wanted to be an astronaut." The next hour passed in a careful dance of introductions. Dr. Chen and Sarah observed while Anastasia guided the interaction. Augustus learned that Theo could name all the planets, that Thea loved to dance, that they both had his competitive streak, but their mother's kindness. When the twins began showing signs of tiredness, Anastasia smoothly ended the visit. "We have a routine," she explained to Augustus. "They need their nap at exactly 2 o'clock, or the rest of the day becomes very challenging." As Sarah prepared to take the twins home, Theo surprised everyone by walking up to Augustus. "Will you come read space books again?" he asked, his brown eyes serious. Augustus looked to Anastasia, understanding that every moment with his children would need to be earned. She nodded slightly. "If you'd like that," he told his son, "I would love to read with you." Thea, not to be left out, added her own condition. "Mama says you have to be nice. No more making people sad." The innocent wisdom of a 2-year-old struck deeper than any corporate negotiation. "I promise," Augustus said, meeting first his daughter's eyes, then Anastasia's. "No more making people sad." After the twins left, Dr. Chen laid out the path forward. Supervised visits, family therapy, a strict schedule that prioritized the children's needs over Augustus's business commitments, and most importantly, complete honesty about his medical condition and its impact on others. "Your story could help many families," Dr. Chen noted, "but only if you're willing to be vulnerable, to admit your mistakes, to show your children that real strength lies in facing the truth." As they left the clinic, Augustus watched Anastasia efficiently organize the twins' next appointments. She had built an entire world while he had hidden from reality. Now, watching her competence and care, he understood the true cost of his pride. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not keeping them from me, even though you had every right to." Anastasia turned to him, her expression both stern and hopeful. "They deserve to know their father, the man you can become, not the man you were. Don't make me regret this chance." The Seattle rain fell softly as they parted ways, but for the first time in years, Augustus felt clean, renewed. He had a long road ahead, earning trust, learning to be a father, making amends for years of damage. But in his pocket, he carried Theo's spare spacebook, given to him with solemn instruction to practice reading. It was a start, a tiny step toward redemption, offered by the pure heart of a child who simply wanted to share his stars. The healing time. 1 year had passed since Augustus first met his children in Dr. Chen's office. The Seattle skyline glittered through the windows of Anastasia's penthouse as friends and family gathered to celebrate the twins' 3rd birthday. The apartment was transformed into a space-themed wonderland, honoring Theo's ongoing fascination with the cosmos while incorporating enough princess elements to satisfy Thea's royal phase. Augustus arrived early to help set up, a changed man from the arrogant CEO who had once publicly humiliated his wives. Regular therapy sessions, co-parenting classes, and the humbling experience of earning his children's trust had reshaped him. He wore jeans and a casual shirt decorated with planets, a gift from Theo that he proudly displayed. "Daddy!" Thea launched herself at him the moment he walked in, her party dress swirling. "Did you bring the special surprise?" Behind her, Theo looked up from his new telescope, equally curious but maintaining his characteristic reserve. "Of course, Princess," Augustus smiled, setting down a large package. "But first, let me help your mother with the decorations." His eyes met Anastasia's across the room, sharing a moment of peaceful understanding. Their co-parenting relationship had evolved into something neither had expected, a partnership built on mutual respect and their children's happiness. The party brought together an unlikely group. Dr. Margaret Chen chatted with Sarah about the Foundation's latest success stories. Vivian, now happily remarried and expecting her first child thanks to Anastasia's treatment protocol, helped arrange the gift table. Several couples who had benefited from the Foundation's work brought their own children, creating a joyful chaos of celebration. Augustus found himself in a quiet moment with Vivian as they watched the twins play with their friends. "I never properly apologized to you," he said softly. "I was so caught up in protecting my image that I hurt everyone around me." Vivian smiled, her hand resting on her growing belly. "The best apology is changed behavior," she replied. "And you've certainly changed. Those kids adore you." The transformation hadn't been easy. Augustus had faced his demons publicly, giving interviews about his journey from denial to acceptance. His story had encouraged other men to seek testing, breaking down stigmas around male infertility. The Foundation, now jointly supported by his business resources and Anastasia's medical expertise, had helped hundreds of couples start families. The highlight of the party came when Augustus and Anastasia together presented the twins with their special gift, a miniature laboratory set up in the playroom, complete with child-safe experiments and tiny lab coats embroidered with Dr. Theo and Dr. Thea. "Just like Mama's lab," Thea exclaimed, immediately donning her coat. "Can we do experiments now?" Theo asked, already examining the safety goggles with serious concentration. "After cake," Anastasia laughed, sharing an amused glance with Augustus. Their children's perfect blend of his determination and her scientific curiosity never failed to delight them. Later, as the party wound down, and tired children were collected by their parents, Augustus helped clean up while the twins dozed on the couch. "They look so peaceful," he murmured. "Sometimes I still can't believe I almost missed this." Anastasia paused in her clean-up efforts. "But you didn't. You did the work. You earned their trust. That's what matters now." The Foundation's latest report lay on her desk. Thousands of families helped, millions in research funding, and a revolutionary shift in how male infertility was discussed and treated. Their personal story had become a catalyst for change, transforming pain into purpose. "Next week's Father-Child Science Day at their preschool," Anastasia reminded him. "Theo wants to demonstrate his new understanding of basic chemistry." "With safe materials only," Augustus chuckled, remembering his son's ambitious proposals, "and Thea insists on wearing her tiara with her lab coat." "She says princesses can be scientists too," Anastasia smiled. "I see no flaw in her logic." As the evening ended, Augustus gently carried each sleeping child to their beds, a privilege he never took for granted. Their rooms told the story of their growing personalities. Theo's ceiling covered in glow-in-the-dark stars, Thea's bookshelf full of both fairy tales and children's science books. "Same time Thursday?" he confirmed with Anastasia, referring to their established custody schedule. "I thought we could take them to the new Children's Museum exhibit on space exploration. They'd love that," she agreed. "Just remember Theo's allergy medicine if you get ice cream after." Standing in the doorway, Augustus reflected on how far they'd come. From public scandal to peaceful co-parenting, from denial to acceptance, from shame to pride in the family they'd created. The journey hadn't been easy, but watching his children sleep, their dreams untroubled by adult complications, he knew every step had been worth it. The night air was crisp as he walked to his car, the weight of his lab coat wearing Princess's goodnight hug still warm in his arms. Above, the stars twinkled, the same stars his son could now name with impressive accuracy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove himself worthy of his children's love. But Augustus was no longer afraid of truth or vulnerability. He had learned that real strength lay not in maintaining a perfect image, but in admitting mistakes and working to correct them. His children had taught him that love was not about control or expectations, but about acceptance and growth, and somewhere along the way, in helping them explore their world with wonder and curiosity, he had discovered the man he was always meant to be. The legacy of love. 5 years had passed since that life-changing medical conference, the grand ballroom of Le Chéri, where Anastasia's heart had once shattered, now sparkled with celebration. It was her 40th birthday, but more importantly, it was the Foundation's 5-year anniversary. The guest list included hundreds of families whose lives had been transformed by her breakthrough treatment. 8-year-old Theo and Thea commanded attention in their formal wear, greeting guests with a poise that came from years of being the Foundation's living success story. Theo, serious in his miniature tuxedo, explained the scientific principles behind their mother's research to anyone who would listen. Thea, radiant in her purple party dress, charmed donors with stories about her latest experiments. Augustus watched his children from across the room, his heart full. They had his ambition, but their mother's compassion, a combination that made them extraordinary. The past 5 years had taught him more about love and humility than his previous 40 had. "Your children are remarkable," Margaret Chen commented, joining him at his table. Now retired from pediatric practice, she served as the Foundation's board chair. "They're living proof that healing is possible, even from the deepest wounds." The evening's program began with a video montage. Hundreds of babies born through their treatment protocol, families made whole, and couples who had found hope. Augustus spotted Vivian in the crowd, her own twins now 3 years old, living proof that happiness could come after heartbreak. Anastasia took the stage, as commanding as ever in her role as the Foundation's director. 5 years ago, she began, we started this journey with a simple truth, that shame and silence destroy more families than any medical condition ever could. The room fell silent, remembering the scandal that had launched this mission. Augustus felt the weight of every eye, knowing his story had become a cautionary tale turned triumph. Today, we've helped over 10,000 couples conceive, Anastasia continued. But more importantly, we've changed the conversation around fertility. No more shame, no more blame, just truth, science, and hope. Theo and Thea joined their mother on stage, each carrying an award to present. The Foundation had created 2 annual honors, the Truth in Medicine Award for medical professionals who championed comprehensive fertility testing, and the Hope Builder Award for couples who shared their stories to help others. Our first recipient, Theo announced with perfect clarity, is someone who taught us that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become better. He turned to look at Augustus, his eyes full of pride. Our father. Augustus froze as Thea beckoned him to the stage. This wasn't part of the program he'd reviewed. He walked up slowly, aware of the symbolic weight of this moment. 5 years ago, Thea said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong, our daddy learned that being strong means telling the truth. He helped other men be brave too. The award they handed him was inscribed with words that blurred through his tears, for turning personal truth into public hope. Anastasia stepped forward, her own eyes glistening. Augustus Everett didn't just acknowledge his past mistakes, he turned them into a mission. The Foundation's male outreach program, which he fully funded and personally champions, has helped thousands of men face fertility testing without shame. The twins hugged him tight as applause filled the room. Augustus felt the weight of the award in his hands, but the real treasure was the feeling of his children's arms around him, their unconditional love, a gift he'd nearly lost to pride. Later, as the party wound down, he found Anastasia on the balcony, where they'd shared their first dance at their wedding. The Seattle skyline sparkled below, a witness to their journey. "Did you plan this?" he asked softly. "The award was their idea," she smiled. "They wrote the speech themselves. They wanted everyone to know how proud they are of who you've become." Augustus watched through the windows as their children demonstrated a simple chemistry experiment to a group of fascinated donors. "They're incredible, Anastasia. You did that. You gave them strength, wisdom, and the courage to face truth." "We did that," she corrected gently, "once you learned to be the father they deserved." Inside, Theo had pulled out his latest research journal, earnestly explaining his observations about plant growth in varying light conditions. Thea was organizing the other children into a mock laboratory team, her natural leadership shining through. "Sometimes," Augustus admitted, "I wake up afraid it's all been a dream, that I'll still be that arrogant man who cared more about his image than the truth." Anastasia touched his arm lightly. "That man wouldn't have won this award. That man wouldn't have helped build this foundation. That man wouldn't have earned our children's pride." The night ended, with the twins falling asleep in the Foundation's quiet room, surrounded by photos of families they'd helped create. Augustus and Anastasia sat with them, no longer bitter exes but partners in the most important work of all, raising children who understood that love was stronger than pride, that truth was more powerful than image, and that family meant standing together through every storm. "They're our greatest experiment," Anastasia whispered, watching their sleeping faces, "and our most beautiful success." Augustus nodded, his heart full of a peace he'd never known in his years of denial and deception. In the end, his legacy wouldn't be his wealth or his business empire. it would be these two remarkable children who had taught him the true meaning of strength and the thousands of families who had found hope through their story. The truth that had once threatened to destroy him had instead set them all free, creating a legacy of love that would echo through generations to come. Here's a heartfelt message of hope and empowerment for women who have faced similar betrayal. Dear strong woman, if you've been blamed, shamed, or abandoned because you couldn't have children, know this: your worth is not measured by your fertility. Anastasia's story teaches us powerful truths that every woman should hold close to her heart. Your pain is not your fault. Like Anastasia, you may have endured cruel words, public humiliation, and the deep ache of being blamed for something beyond your control. Remember that medical issues are not moral failings, and infertility is not a reflection of your worth as a woman. Don't let anyone's ignorance break your spirit. When Augustus blamed Anastasia, she didn't let his cruelty define her. Instead, she channeled her pain into purpose, using her knowledge and strength to help others. Your struggles can become your power if you refuse to let shame silence you. Trust in your own timing. Life's greatest gifts often come when we least expect them. Anastasia found her miracle not by desperately trying to please a man who didn't deserve her, but by believing in herself and her abilities. Your journey may take unexpected turns, but that doesn't make it any less valuable. You deserve a partner who stands with you through every storm. A man who blames you for fertility issues instead of facing them together is showing you who he truly is. Real love means facing challenges as a team, supporting each other through medical appointments, and being willing to look at all possibilities, including that he might be the one with fertility issues. Your future is not written by your past hurts. Like Anastasia, you can rise from betrayal stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Whether your path leads to children through medical intervention, adoption, or a child-free life filled with other forms of love and purpose, you get to write your own ending. Remember, you are not broken. You are not less of a woman. You deserve honest, unconditional love. Your worth isn't measured by your ability to conceive. Sometimes losing someone who doesn't respect you is the first step toward finding the life you deserve. Like Anastasia, you may find that what seems like your greatest heartbreak becomes the catalyst for your most meaningful transformation. Trust that you are stronger than you know, and that somewhere in your pain lies the seed of a purpose that only you can fulfill. Hold your head high, dear one. Your story isn't over. It's just taking a different path than you expected. And sometimes those unexpected paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. With hope and solidarity for every woman who has walked this path. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear these words of hope and healing. Every woman's journey deserves to be heard. For more inspiring stories that celebrate strength, resilience, and the power of truth, follow our page and join a community that understands and supports you. Together, we rise. Sparkles.